And here we have a graphic of the basic cooperative principles. There are 10 of them, and you've got that on your handout. And these are really kind of the core of the whole enterprise. And some of you, are any of you here involved with worker-owned cooperatives in the United States? Some of you are probably, do these look familiar to you? I've seen them at some other presentations. But the way they structured in Mondragon, the core is education, as I mentioned earlier. Along with education, sovereignty of labor is really critical, and that's the notion that the work that people do, that's key, that's what generates the wealth. So those are really the two core principles that, on which everything else is built. And then around that are 5 more principles: the instrumental and subordinated nature of capital. They recognize that capital does play a role, it is important, and yet the capital is there to serve the people, not the other way around. So capital is needed to keep the businesses sustainable, but it's not there to generate, unlimited amounts of capital for a few people. And then we have democratic organization. As I said earlier, one person, one vote is the principle. And the way it works is when new people are hired into one of the co-ops, they do have a probationary period of somewhere between 6 months and a year, in which time they're considered temporary workers. But then once that time is finished, if it's working out well, if they really want to stay and it looks like they're fitting in and they're committed to the principles, then they can become full-fledged worker owners. They do have to pay in a sum of several thousand euros, which they can have taken off their paycheck over a 10-year period at a 1% interest, so it's very affordable. But then they become full-fledged worker owners, and they have a full vote in all of the decision-making processes. Then we have open admission. That represents the notion that it's like equal opportunity employment. There's no discrimination based on race, gender, ethnicity, age, etc. Then participation in management. Again, workers from all different aspects are eligible to be elected to the board of directors of each cooperative. Board members receive extensive training and coaching and mentoring. So it's really encouraged to participate and take part in shaping how the business will be developed. And then finally, in the inner circle there, wage solidarity is a very, very important principle. Some of you may have heard, I see that our Vice Mayor Ritterman is in the audience. Some of you may have heard him talk about income inequality and how when you have huge income inequality, that correlates with a lot of the social ills that we experience in Richmond and elsewhere. And sadly, the United States, of all the industrial countries, has the greatest income inequality. And the notion of wage solidarity is one strategy for combating that and for reducing it, making incomes more equal. So in Mondragon, there's a commitment that the highest paid workers, of course, they do realize that different jobs require different levels of skill and experience, so not everybody's paid the same. But the highest paid workers, top executives, top managers, earn no more than 6 or 7 times the very lowest paid workers. Now, compare that with some of the corporations in the US where the CEOs make maybe 300, 400 times the lowest paid worker. So in Mondragon, just to put it into figures, the lowest paid jobs are roughly around $20,000 a year. So that means the highest paid managers are making maybe $120,000, $140,000 a year. And it seems to work, they're fine, they live quite well. They all have very, very extensive benefits, full benefits, which are quite generous, and that's a very important principle. Then on the outside, we see that the 3 additional notions of universal nature, which is, means that this notion of cooperative enterprise is something that can be replicated anywhere where humans interact with each other. Intercooperation is very important. The co-ops, they cooperate with each other. They're not there to compete with each other and put each other out of business. The whole notion is, yeah, we can share some resources. We can even shift some workers from one to the other if we need more and you have too many, and that kind of thing. And then social transformation. The whole idea is that if this model were to spread, it could really provide the social transformation to allow for a world where everybody's needs are fully met, which we're still not there yet. The next slide. This is just the same thing for those of you that like to see things in list form. We've got the same 10 cooperative principles as a list. This is again from one of the Mondragon PowerPoints. Next slide. Here we have the corporate management model. We actually got this beautiful whole book. They have this whole system whereby each of these components has a whole, it can be developed out for a system of continual evaluation and assessment and improvement through their management model, which is, the core of it is the 10 basic cooperative principles, which I mentioned earlier, surrounded by the notion of people in cooperation, surrounded by creating joint projects with participative organization, resulting in an excellent company and socio-entrepreneurial results, meaning good for meeting the social needs of the community and also creating enough profits to be sustainable. Okay, the next slide. And here are the corporate values of Mondragon: cooperation, participation, social responsibility, and innovation, which is going on constantly. The next slide. Here's next couple of slides show a little bit about the comparison between conventional corporations that we're used to and the Mondragon Cooperative Corporation. In the conventional corporation, you've got this pyramid with a few people at the top making the decisions and exerting their authority on the large numbers of workers who are at the bottom of the pyramid. But with Mondragon, it's the opposite. You have the autonomous co-ops and workers are at the top. Beneath them, you have the corporate management, which is there to support the autonomous co-ops. As we were told by our primary instructor, Gayle, he says, I work in the corporate office, but I'm not here to tell people in the co-ops what to do. I'm here to listen to them tell me what they need, and when we hear what they need, then we find ways to coordinate assistance or to integrate things to support what they're trying to do. And then the next slide shows kind of the relationship between people and capital, which is a little bit different than what we're used to. In the conventional corporation, power rests with capital and whoever controls the capital, namely the shareholders. So the more shares you own, the more power you have in the corporation. And people, who are the workers, are sometimes called human resources, which I always found kind of an odd term. They're used as tools to serve capital and generate greater profits. Whereas with Mondragon, it's the other way around. The power rests with the people in the form of worker ownership and workplace democracy, and capital is used as a tool to serve the people. Okay, next. And here, one more. Oh, no. Yeah. This is one that I got from their PowerPoint, and it had that little added feature that, anyway. So this is just a graphic that shows the notion of intercooperation. You see on the top of the table, there are all these autonomous co-ops that are in the network, and then the 4 pillars that really support them are educational, social, financial, and research and development. Each one is really critical to maintaining the network as a whole. Okay, now we're going to show some pictures that we actually took on our trip. You can see here Mayor McLaughlin at corporate headquarters, and there's the slogan, Mondragon, humanity at work, finance, industry, retail, knowledge, and to the right of that are the same words in Basque, which is quite an interesting language we discovered. If we go to the next slide, there you have again Basque on the left, and on the right the same thing in Spanish. All of the businesses, the co-ops there, are conducted in 2 languages, Basque and Spanish. Most people speak Basque day to day, but they all know Spanish as well. And of course, we got a lot of things in English because they do get visitors from all over the world, and they do have some business dealings in other countries as well. Here is a picture on the left. The gentleman on the right is Gayle, Les Amis, who was our main instructor throughout the week. And the woman in the middle is, I don't know her name, but she is one of the workers at a cooperative called Fagor, which is one of the industrial cooperatives that makes washing machines. They did ask us not to take photographs within the factory, but we got to walk on the factory floor and watch them make washing machines. A couple of the things that they mentioned to us is that the workers have a lot of say in how the conditions are structured. And one of the things, for example, that they came up with was that no worker does the same task for an entire 8-hour shift. After 2 hours, they all shift tasks to do something different so that they're not, getting too stressed, and their body's not too stressed in one way, and that seems to work well for them. And there are a variety of other things that they instituted that make the workday go a lot better for them, and the workers decided this themselves. Next slide. And here you can see a gentleman who's one of the directors of the Caja Laboral, which is the bank, which was started, as I mentioned, in the 50s. It is owned by the people who work at the bank and all of the Mondragon Cooperatives and their workers who do business with them. That's who owns it. And on top, beyond that, this bank has thousands of additional individual and business accounts throughout Spain. It's a huge bank. They are #1 in customer satisfaction and very successful. When we had this discussion, an interesting question came up. Somebody in our group was asking them about some of their banking practices. I don't know a lot about the details, but apparently in the US it's common for banks to do something, and there's a term for it which I don't know. They lend out actually more money than they take in a year, and the reason they do, it's somewhat risky, but they do that because there's a calculation that they'll get payments back and it'll eventually all work out with the market fluctuations. So one of our people asked this gentleman, well, how much more do you actually lend out and take in, wanting to know how risky are you? And he sort of looked at him and said, didn't really understand the question. So I'm not sure what you're talking about, but maybe the next slide will explain. And the next slide showed that in 2009, Caja Laboral took in 18 billion euros in deposits, and they lent out 16 billion euros. So they basically don't lend out any more than they take in. They have a very fiscally conservative policy. That's just the way that they've always done business. Okay, the next slide. And here is a picture from Eroski. That's the big supermarket chain. We were able to do a field trip to a giant store and do a little shopping. They have full service grocery with fresh produce and everything. In addition, they have household goods, clothing, all kinds of things. And as you can see here, this is we are a consumer cooperative in which the workers are owners and the consumers are members. It's actually, technically, it's both a consumer and a worker cooperative. Our object is guarantee of sustainability. We are from here, local. We are not a subsidiary. The decisions are taken here. We cannot be taken over. Collective ownership, the workers. One other thing I wanted to mention also, when we were having discussions about the management model and how that works, someone from our group asked, well, what do you do if you have a problem with the worker, if somebody's really not pulling their weight, or they're kind of lazy, or they're just having problems on the job? Do you have a mechanism for disciplining and firing people? And again, the presenters looked kind of strange and said, well, once people are become, past the probationary time, become owner members, he said, we don't do that. We don't fire people. If they're not performing, we talk to them. We look, maybe there's something going on at home. Maybe they're going through a divorce or sickness in the family, or maybe the job that they're doing isn't right for them. They'd be better suited at another job. So, we work with them. We dialogue. We find a solution. But we don't fire people. And in fact, he said in the whole 50 years, he's only aware of maybe a couple people were fired for gross embezzlement or something like that. But basically, they just don't. They work with people and believe in them. And they also have not had layoffs, which has been pretty amazing, because even in this recession, we've had this extreme global recession in the last 2 years, they've been able to, with a lot of creative ideas and stretching things here and there, they've come up with ways to prevent layoffs to this day, which is, again, a very powerful phenomenon. Here is the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, which is nearby.